DawgNation. It's Brandon Adams, the host of DawgNation Daily, the daily podcast for Georgia Bulldogs fans, and we are glad to be with you today, and I'm happy to announce that I believe we're going to be available in all of our various outlets today. Facebook Live back up and running again. Of course, YouTube, like always, and the audio versions of the show as well. We've got some fantastic brand new upgrades to our studio equipment that's going to make delivering these shows every day easier and better for you, but there's some growing pains in the initial process there. We've kind of gone through that. We've got Jeff Sintel coming up later on. We'll talk a lot of recruiting stuff with him, some interesting stuff from Kirby Smart on the Georgia quarterback situation, and we'll start the show with some good news. Some UGA recruiting targets, well, they've said some things that I think Georgia fans are going to like. I'll tell you all about it next as DawgNation Daily begins right now.
Presented by DawgNation.com, this is DawgNation Daily, the daily podcast for Georgia Bulldogs fans. Here's your host, Brandon Adams.
So last night here on the various outlets of DawgNation, you saw a great edition of Before the Hedges presented by Kroger. Our buddy Hannah Chalker along with Jeff Sintel. A lot of UGA recruiting stuff on there, and as I'm watching the show, you know, I saw lots of examples of what I thought was really good news for Georgia fans. So if you don't mind, obviously on Tuesdays we talk recruiting anyway as a part of our Marlowe's Tavern Tell-All with Jeff Sintel a little later on in the program. But we'll get back to the spring practice talk in a moment, but I wanted to at least take a break from that for a moment here off the top of the show to kind of deal with what I thought was some really interesting recruiting news and potentially good news for Georgia fans as the Dogs try to put together that number one class for 2019. And oh yeah, by the way, some context for that one more time if you don't mind. I thought that yesterday's audio that we played on DawgNation Daily of Lane Kiffin saying as long as Nick Saban's still got the best players, he's still going to be the best coach and he's going to stick around for another 10 years. And we asked the question yesterday of, well, how much longer is Saban going to have the best players? Because he may have had a slight talent advantage in the national championship game in January of this year. There's no doubt about that. But Georgia's number one class of 2018, working towards the number one class of 2019. How much longer is that talent advantage going to favor Alabama when these two teams are compared side by side in the future, the Bulldogs and the Crimson Tide? If Georgia keeps outworking Alabama on the recruiting trail, isn't Georgia also heading for a roster one day and maybe in the very near future that's better than the Alabama Crimson Tide? I think we're seeing that sort of unfold here, and Before the Hedges last night was a good example of that. Let me start with a guy who is a Georgia commit right now. He is the four-star defensive end from Memphis. He is Bill Norton, and one of the things we liked about Norton to begin with was the fact this is another example of Georgia kind of going into enemy territory. They have been rough on the Vols in their own state there of the state of Tennessee. They go into Memphis this time and get Bill Norton, much the same way they went into Knoxville last recruiting cycle to get Cade Mays. We already like that about Norton. It's a impressive player from Memphis in a city that Jeremy Pruitt wants to own, but Georgia doing well right here. Something else to like about Norton, though, is y'all know I'm a bit of a pro wrestling fan. I grew up loving pro wrestling, really for the most part, still kind of like it now. And, you know, the famous suplex maneuvers, those big overhead slams that you see in pro wrestling matches, well, Bill Norton likes bringing those into the world of football. I thought this was funny from him on Before the Hedges last night. Take a listen to his description of why it is that he likes to be so rough and have these suplexes out there on the field.
That's always been my mentality ever since I started playing football. I mean, in middle school and when I first started, I was just so much bigger than everyone. I wasn't that educated on tackling, so I would just kind of grab them and throw them. So that's where that started. And then, I mean, high school started. It wasn't easy to do that. So, I mean, but whenever I get the chance, I like suplexing people if I can. Gotta be a little careful and not getting flagged, but I like hitting people, definitely.
And I think Georgia fans like that attitude of I like hitting people. That's the kind of tenacity that Georgia fans want to see the defense play with, and Norton certainly seems to bring it there. Of course, we were watching some of his film here on the video version of DawgNation Daily while he was talking there last night from Before the Hedges, and you do see that sort of, you know, high tackling style a bit. That may be something that Kirby Smart works on a bit. Trey Scott works on a bit with him once he gets to Athens as far as a bit lower pad level, but nonetheless, you like the overall attitude that Bill Norton brings to the table, and I love that description from him last night. Something else that Georgia fans are going to like from this time not a Georgia commit, but certainly a hardcore recruiting target of the Georgia Bulldogs, a guy that I have sort of made a big case for maybe being the number one uncommitted player out there for Georgia right now. Of course, I'm talking about the four-star defensive tackle Trayvon Walker. Jeff Sintel recently caught up with Trayvon Walker. You saw some of this video on Before the Hedges last night, too, and they had kind of a wide-ranging conversation about how Walker's recruitment's going to go. Obviously, you know what a huge position of need this is for the Georgia Bulldogs, elite defensive tackles, something that Georgia really hasn't found in either of its last 2 recruiting cycles. They've certainly had some defensive tackles that have a chance to eventually impress, but not of the caliber of prospect that Trayvon Walker is. And to give you an indication of just how big of a priority Walker might be for Georgia right now, listen to this description from Walker. You saw it last time on Before the Hedges. Good interview done on the scene with Jeff Sintel. And Walker describes that apparently his recruitment is so important for Georgia that Kirby Smart's taking a bit of a lead in this at the moment. If you're a UGA fan, you'll love the links that Georgia's going to get a prospect like Walker. Here's Trayvon Walker to explain.
Javon, which head coach plays the biggest role in your recruiting right now?
Right now, that stays in contact, Coach Smart.
Really?
Yeah, Coach Smart. He's just like, most of the time when he was on the road, he made sure he get stopped to see me. And he gets on the phone with me just about every week. You know, some head coaches you really can't get that from, but he finds time to make for me. So.
And, you know, one of the things that I love about that is it kind of reminds me of what we saw in the 2018 recruiting cycle with Rick Sandage, the 4-star defensive tackle that Georgia wanted, but South Carolina had maybe made, if you want to be honest here, maybe made a bit more of a priority. Will Muschamp had kind of taken a lead role in that recruitment. You listen to Walker describe there that, you know, he's getting those contacts from Kirby Smart, that even in busy times for Smart, he's finding a way to let Walker know that he's a priority, let Walker know that he's important there. For Georgia fans who sort of have those fingers crossed about adding Trayvon Walker to this 2019 class, the fact that Kirby Smart is in so much contact, and when Jeff Sintel sort of asked the question of, hey, which head coach has made the biggest impact on you, which head coach is most consequential in your recruitment right now, the fact that Walker leans in the direction of Kirby Smart, I think that bodes well for the eventual decision that Walker's going to make. You know, he was a bit non-committal about, you know, exactly who's going to, you know, be a part of that top 5 and the visits that he's going to take, but ultimately it looks like Georgia's in pretty good shape there, and I think you have Kirby Smart to thank for the reasons why that's true. But as they say on TV, wait, that's not all. There is one more sort of big thing I want to bring to the table here as well, and you also saw this last night on Before the Hedges. Y'all know that for a while the topic of conversation has been, and it seems like this has quieted down a bit as of late, but certainly over the last 12 months, there's been a lot of discussion about Nolan Smith, the Georgia commit, but a guy that has had his flirtations with Clemson. He's had his flirtations with Alabama. There's even been some stuff online between he and Ohio State from time to time. He's taken his visits. It wasn't really even that long ago that, you know, he goes on the visit to Alabama and says they would have a chance to flip him. And a lot of people wonder, well, what does this mean for Georgia Nolan Smith? The fact that he's not, you know, shutting down his recruitment, the fact that he's not completely locked down in the direction of Georgia, is that a reason to be worried? Is that a reason to be concerned? And the one thing that Jeff Sintel has sort of said over and over again is that, you know, you can worry about Nolan Smith at the point in which he stops recruiting for Georgia. That ultimately that almost ends up being the proof that you need of where a guy's heart is leaning, the work that he's doing to recruit on behalf of Georgia. And at the Nike opening qualifier in Beaufort over the weekend, another example of that from Nolan Smith, out there working hard, recruiting, pushing. He looks at that 2019 class for Georgia. He sees one big need, and to show you how committed Nolan Smith is, listen to the sounds of him recruiting on Georgia's behalf for a player that he wants to see join him in that 2019 class for Georgia.
I need DBs. I need a back end. Andrew Booth, I need you. Andrew Booth, I need you. You're a DB. You're an amazing DB. I need DBs. Like that. We already got the wide receivers. We already got the running backs. We already got D linemen, inside linebackers, outside linebackers. We need DBs.
So, listen, we'll get to what Andrew Booth is as a player in just a moment, but on the Nolan Smith part of this here just for a second, I mean, how could you deny that guy right there sounds like he's locked down for Georgia for its class of 2019 with the energy and enthusiasm he shows towards adding other people into that class. And it's Andrew Booth right there, but it's been a lot of other players here over the last few months. He's been a major influence on a lot of guys, and I think for Georgia fans who wonder where Nolan Smith's heart ultimately lies, to me, that audio and the video you saw last night Before the Hedges kind of tells you all you need to know that Nolan Smith is a guy that certainly appears to me to be a very excited member of Georgia's 2019 class. And as far as Andrew Booth, the 4-star defensive back from Archer High School, well, he feels pretty good about the attention he's getting from Nolan Smith. He told Jeff Sintel, and I'm going to read this to you from DawgNation.com, it means a lot what Nolan Smith just said there. For somebody of that caliber to place that trust in my game and to feel that way about me, he's been up as a player for a minute. I'm still trying to get up there where he's at. It feels really good to hear him say that. That's 4-star defensive back Andrew Booth, feeling pretty good about the attention that he's getting from Nolan Smith. And by the way, Nolan Smith also showed out at the opening this week. He was essentially like 99th percentile in all the measurables. He's been putting those big spark scores and things like that up for a long time, and he sort of added to his legend as a recruit here this weekend. But overall, I think the story here, if you're a Georgia fan, is simply this. Whether it be a committed player like Bill Norton, there's a lot to like about him, or uncommitted players like Andrew Booth or Trayvon Walker, there's momentum building for this 2019 class. Nolan Smith, they also, rock-solid commitment to Georgia is a part of that, too. Georgia #1 class for 2018, working to see that done in 2019 as well. And I think the next few months here on DawgNation Daily and in the Cintel Intel and Before the Hedges, all the various places where we talk about UGA recruiting, my guess is there's going to be a lot of good news to talk about. My name is Brandon Adams, and this is DawgNation Daily, the daily podcast for Georgia Bulldogs fans. We're glad to have you with us. Good to be back on Facebook Live today. I know some of you were a little frustrated yesterday because the Facebook situation was just not working out for us. We got all that stuff taken care of. We apologize that we were not able to deliver the Facebook Live broadcast the way you've come to expect it. We were on YouTube yesterday, and don't forget, you can always catch us on video on YouTube and Facebook every morning at 10 a.m., and you can watch it live then. You can go back and rewatch it later on if you would like, but that's how you can catch up with the DawgNation Daily on video each and every day. We also love being on the radio on Athens Sports Radio 960 The Ref. We're there at noon every day for you in the Classic City, and we're proud about that. And then in podcast form, pretty much wherever podcasts can be found, Apple Podcasts, the Android devices. I post the show at the world-famous DawgNation.com. We're just really glad that you find DawgNation Daily, video, audio, radio, everything in between. We're just glad that you've caught up with our program. We will catch up ourselves with Jeff Sintel here coming up in just a moment. He was a part of that Nike opening qualifier event in Buford on Sunday. A lot of little tidbits going to come out of that, more than what I just delivered to you right there. We'll get a lot of that coming up with Jeff Sintel on our program in just a little bit. And, of course, we're also going to transition here for a moment before we bring in Jeff and do a lot more recruiting talk with him. I kind of want to put our attention back on Georgia spring practice for a moment, because I think you see something pretty fascinating unfolding right now. And as you might imagine, we're going to obviously mention this a lot, but that quarterback competition that's ongoing between Jake Fromm and Justin Fields is pretty neat. And yes, I do call it a competition, even if I think that when everything is done here, Jake Fromm is still going to be the starting quarterback for Georgia. There's no doubt that he's having to come out and prove himself every single day because of just how good Justin Fields is. And when you listen to the description from Kirby Smart of what he's seeing from Fromm and Fields here in 2018, and how that may be a little bit different from, say, Fromm and Eason in 2017, you get a sense for just what a transition and evolution this Georgia program has kind of gone through over the course of the last 12 months. Kirby Smart was asked about that on Saturday. What's it like with these two quarterbacks this year compared to Fromm, who was here a year ago, along with Jacob Eason, who was himself another 5-star prospect? Pretty interesting description from Kirby Smart. Take a listen to this.
I think it's a little different because I think Jake obviously played more games than Jacob did. With the success we were able to have getting the extra games, he's picked things up well, and Justin's a very advanced quarterback, similar to how Jake was coming in. So those guys have they've done a good job picking it up. I'm extremely pleased with the leadership both of them provide, and also kind of how they push the defense. I mean, Jake's out there competing each day.
What I notice about this, and I want to be careful that I don't read too much into it, but what I kind of notice about this is it doesn't really sound like Kirby Smart's playing any games right there. I would dare suggest that in 2017, the spring especially, there was a lot of gamesmanship on Smart's part. Maybe talking up Fromm to an extra degree as a way of trying to push Jacob Eason. And then when maybe Jacob Eason didn't have the world's best G-Day, Smart spent some of the time in the summer kind of maybe overpraising Eason as a way of building up his confidence. And kind of on you kind of went with that sort of tug-of-war of let's talk up Jake Fromm in 1 minute, but let's not get too far away from praising Jacob Eason in another minute. And maybe that's me as a guy who does sort of a broadcast show every single day, maybe reading too much into that and constructing a narrative where it doesn't need to be there. But that certainly was the appearance that 2017 gave us, is that with Kirby Smart's public comments, he was trying to sort of cast the narrative of the quarterback competition in a certain way. But you don't really have any need to do that, apparently, in 2018. It's praise of both guys, but it's not too much praise. It's compliments of the leadership of both guys, but pretty matter-of-fact about what they're bringing to the table. I think that makes it pretty interesting for Fromm and Fields the rest of the way in the spring, and what Kirby Smart also says about them. And by the way, speaking of quarterbacks, Smart also talked a bit on Saturday about Georgia's third quarterback, the former walk-on Stetson Bennett. Here is what he said about Bennett, also kind of fitting into this competition a bit.
I don't know. I think last year, with no Bryce, you felt like there was not a three there evident. I think Stetson, being that he's done what he did through fall camp, the season being the scout team guy, and then the bowl practices getting the work, I feel like we got three guys there that are really competing and doing a good job.
And what you hear from Kirby Smart there about Stetson Bennett matches what a lot of people were saying about Bennett going back to the bowl season. I mean, remember the Georgia players who would occasionally compliment Bennett for his role in emulating Baker Mayfield in bowl practices and sort of pretending to be the Oklahoma offense? He was getting some praise there for that, and apparently he's showing that some this spring too. Now, I don't know that Bennett's quite the caliber of prospect that Jake Fromm and Justin Fields are, but in terms of the quarterback depth at Georgia, it's more than just two names. Apparently, to listen to Kirby Smart right there are three names worthy of consideration in that discussion. So we'll look forward to paying attention to this quarterback competition as it unfolds over the next couple of weeks. For now, though, it's time to turn our attention back to UGA recruiting, focusing on our buddy Jeff Sintel as a part of our Marlowe's Tavern Tell-All. We're glad to have you with us on DawgNation Daily.
From Athens and across the SEC or wherever the recruiting trail may lead, here's a DawgNation.com insider.
And we'll say hello to Jeff Sintel here on this Tuesday. It's a Marlowe's Tavern Tell-All Tuesday. It's a moment for us to find out a little bit more about the chef-inspired food at Marlowe's Tavern and also find out about some UGA recruiting news. And let me start with the Marlowe's part of this. Did you know that the way at Marlowe's that they slice the vegetables changed the way they taste? Take the celery, for instance. They cut it very, very thin because it has an excellent mouthfeel and produces a brighter celery flavor. We tell you all the time, it's chef-inspired food at Marlowe's. And that's an example of the links in which they go to prove that every single time you go. Every time Jeff and I go to Marlowe's, we always have a great time, and it's always great to have Jeff Sintel here on DawgNation Daily, too. Jeff, good morning. Welcome to the program. How you doing?
Hey, man. Hey, Brandon. Good morning, man. I'm doing better than that Royale on the Marlowe's menu that you always seem to pick up. But, man, I got a huge question for you to start the show. Is this the I can see clearly now episode of DawgNation Daily with UGA recruiting? Because where's Eddie's blindfold, man? That needs to be answered immediately.
Oh, my gosh. I just noticed this. So for those of you watching on video, Eddie has lost his blindfold. I didn't even realize that. It must have fallen off. Yeah, I guess he can see clearly now, and maybe he's optimistic about where things are going. He's out of character here with the blindfold. Whoever knew that putting Eddie on the set every day would lead to so many problems? Now, if you listen to the show, you have no idea what we're talking about, but we have our mascot, Blind Eddie, that's on the stage with us here every single day, and today he happens to be without his blindfold, and I just now realized that when you said that. Jeff, thank you for, as always, much like I'm sure our comment section is, kind of keeping us on track with all this stuff. I certainly appreciate that.
I mean, it was funny. I dropped into the show early just to see what everybody was doing, and then I saw the comment section, and I was like, man, is this like some Marlowe's Tell-All commercial that we're going to do in the middle of the daily or something like that? Eddie's sight has been restored by Nolan Smith's comments and what he said about Andrew Booth, or maybe what Dominic Blaylock said about Jaden Hazelwood. It seems like everyone sees clearly to now after the Nike Atlanta Open. Yeah,
but we've got to stay in character, though. So my buddy Michael helps me. We've got our blindfold back on Eddie here. He now looks the way he's supposed to look. I honestly, I did not even realize that. We've had an issue for a while where the blindfold's been slowly sneaking up above his eyes, and I guess finally it just sort of popped off. So, Jeff, I appreciate that. And speaking of popping off, Nolan Smith also popped off as well with you on Sunday over there in Beaufort, Georgia. You mentioned what he said about Andrew Booth. I love that. We obviously talked about that for a couple of minutes before you joined us on the show today, and I think that that my takeaway on this is, and you've been telling us this, for a long time. We've talked about this before, that in terms of being worried about a guy like Nolan Smith and his commitment to Georgia, start that worry the moment he stops recruiting for UGA, and that sort of moment never seems to come. His public comments about Andrew Booth are sort of another example of just how committed Smith seems to still be to Georgia, even though he's obviously taken some time to go through the recruiting process himself.
Yeah, I'm going to show a little bit of insight. A little bit of, maybe this might be a little inside baseball. You guys can maybe comment on if this is a little bit too much insidery stuff here. But first of all, Nolan Smith is a wonderful, fantastic, charismatic interview. He is excellent. And what happened, the way the opening went on Sunday, when everyone's feet stopped chattering and we got to play the part of popsicle sticks on the sidelines, is when the offensive and defensive lineman portion of the camp concluded, those gentlemen were free to leave. And that's different than the way the openings have been in the past. Everybody hung around until the very end. So while the running backs and linebackers were camping, all those offensive and defensive lineman guys were available for interviews. And there were reporters that covered Clemson, Alabama, Ohio State, the gamut of all the schools that are still considering Nolan. So Nolan is a very gracious interview, and he comes up to all those people, and they may write for a certain site, and they're gonna fish out. If you're the Clemson reporter, they're gonna fish out the most interesting click dangling comments that they can find through an interview with Nolan Smith about Clemson. And the same thing goes for Alabama, and they have their readers to serve. So what they're doing there is they're just kind of taking care of their customers, much like Marlowe's would, with information that might be the most interesting to their appetites of their customers. So sometimes you'll see a Clemson story pop up. You'll see a Alabama story pop up. All I know is, like, with that interview with Nolan, he sometimes calls we, meaning the University of Georgia, and sometimes he says we as everyone in the state of Georgia. But then when he says we need linebackers and we need DBs, we need inside, he says we have all those positions except DBs. He said, I need a back end. He's not talking about any other depth chart there except the one at the University of Georgia. I still think Nolan has always been, his heart has always wanted to play for Georgia. It was the school he wanted to play for. It was his dream school. It was that first huge offer he ever got. He's a Savannah resident. All these things work well in Georgia's favor, but very particular part of the interview we wrote about Sunday night is he compared the Mark Richt era to the Kirby Smart era. He had gracious comments for Mark Richt, but he says Kirby Smart is a guy that knows what he's doing. He says he can't wait to see the new Jumbotron, the new recruiting room. He's got to be there at G-Day. He has to be there for G-Day. He has to give home an official visit as well, even though it's going to take his official visits to other schools. And I do think Nolan just has a particular way of doing this. He's definitely building his brand. He's making himself a marketable commodity as he works his way towards the clear path that he's on right now to the professional ranks. I do think, Brandon, it's an interesting contrast to the way Jaden Hazelwood goes about his recruitment, which is the best way for him. Nolan Smith going about his recruitment, which is the best way for him. And then how Dominic Blaylock goes about his recruitment, which is the very best way for him and the Blaylock family.
Yeah, I want to talk about a lot of these guys before we let you go here today on our Marlowe's Tavern Tell-All on DawgNation Daily. But one more thing on Nolan Smith before we move on. Because you talk about what a good interview he is, because he is so outspoken and so charismatic, you almost forget sometimes that he's also a dominant player, that his fame is not solely built around his ability to sort of craft a good quote. That, you look at his spark scores and things like that from the event, this weekend, and kind of, consistent with all of his performances in recruiting events like this. This is more than just a well-spoken mouthpiece of the 2019 class. This is a truly elite player who is in really pretty rarefied air, right?
I'm going to maybe go a little bit heavy on the sauce here, Brandon, but I think it is all deserved with this following breakdown of Nolan Smith. Everybody knows about Adam Anderson, Brenton Cox, Azeez Ojulari, Quay Walker, all these elite defensive end types that Georgia has signed. I think Nolan Smith has the potential to be better than each and every one of those guys. He is explosive. He is twitchy. He could have literally ran circles around everyone at that Nike opening camp yesterday. He had the speed rush. That's all he needed to do. He needed to go to that move. He could beat anybody in his way. But he knew he had that. So he started working on other things in his toolbox. He started working on spin moves to the inside, spin moves towards A gap and B gap. He is just a complete player. He's 6'3". He's 234, and I got two just jaw-dropping stats. He ran faster than Hazelwood and Blaylock.
Wow.
In those frigid times at the Nike opening. And I want to pay close attention to his short shuttle, because his short shuttle was 4.15. And if you look on the NBA, the NFL Combine coverage recently, when they give you the skinny on what is the shuttle run, they say 4.2, and that's the 5-10-5, where you go 5 yards in one direction, You go 10 yards in the other direction, and then you go 5 yards back, and it's all set up with cones. And then an NFL draft prospect, for them to run a 4.2 short shuttle is considered good. We're talking about a linebacker here. We're talking about a 234-pound outside linebacker who times faster in a 40 than the 5-star receivers that Georgia has committed for the class of 2019. We're talking about a very special player. I think Nolan Smith is going to be eventually one of the top 5 recruits Georgia has landed in the last decade.
Wow, Jeff, that's certainly a bold statement, but you understand where that comes from. Here in our Marlowe's Tavern Tell-All, tell me a little bit more about the subject of Nolan Smith's public recruitment from this past weekend, Andrew Booth, the defensive back there from Archer High School. We've seen Archer produce a lot of top players here over the last few recruiting cycles. What do we need to know about Booth at the moment?
Yeah, and here's where I'm trying to serve my readers, man. I mean, you're giving your show, Brand. You get some sharp teeth on your show, because some of that stuff about Travon Walker we recorded on video and we dropped on Before the Edges. That hasn't even shown up in the intel yet. So we're really telling all today on the daily. But Booth is something I have 20 stories to write right now coming out of the opening. But when Nolan made those very pointed, particular comments about Andrew Booth, I'm literally writing all my stories. And I get a hold of Andrew Booth Sunday night. I'm in a restaurant near Buford High School, cranking out all my work. And I say, I got to talk to Booth. And I speak to Booth, and this is what's very interesting, because I spoke to Booth last October, and the names coming out of his mouth were Clemson and Alabama, Ohio State, minimal Georgia, very minimal Georgia. And when I went on your show, and I've been on the forum, and people are asking me, what's up with Andrew Booth? I said, not happening. It doesn't seem like it's a fit for the staff with Booth. Well, there was a junior day earlier this year where Georgia invited all their elite commits, but also their elite targets. And these are very small sample sizes. I'm talking about groups of 15 to 20 at the most. That way everybody gets one-on-one attention with the coaches. That means everybody gets personal time. The staff believes that is the more effective way to recruit than bringing in 50 guys at a time and having lots of pictures show up, where basically the only time a player talks to a coach is when they're taking pictures or when they got 15 minutes in the office. Not the way this staff goes about its business. Andrew Booth told me that Georgia's communication has changed considerably over the last few months. They are now definitely in the thick of things. He sees what Georgia needs. He knows Georgia still needs DBs. He is getting the attention from a marquee recruit like Nolan Smith, but he's also hearing from guys like Kirby Smart and Mel Tucker quite a lot. Now, he's got a lot of schools to choose from, because Alabama, Ohio State, Clemson, all those schools are still there. But he is the nation's number 5 cornerback for 2019. And, you know, Brandon, you want to start putting your mental click list or your mental jot list about the guys you think this class needs to have. Travon Walker's way up there. Owen Popeau is way up there. Andrew Booth is definitely way up there as the nation's number 5 cornerback for 2019. In-state kid, Gwinnett County kid. This is checking a lot of boxes in Brandon's mind right now. I know that. but the other thing to think about here with Andrew Booth is number 5 cornerback. Remember Tyson Campbell, 2018, number 2 cornerback. Can you imagine a Georgia secondary 2020 where you've got Tyson Campbell on one side and another top 5 cornerback like Andrew Booth on the other side? Can you imagine guys like Campbell and Booth going head-to-head in practice today against guys like Hazelwood, guys like Dominic Blaylock? That is just a incredibly competitive gladiator-style arena for Georgia football, where everybody gets better.
Yeah, it just speaks to what Kirby Smart has done since he's been the coach at Georgia, which is when he sees a recruiting need, the method is to sort of answer it emphatically in the recruiting trail with multiple guys over the course of multiple cycles, and that would be an example of that. Let me mention another defensive back here real quickly, because I thought it was kind of curious to see Chester Kimbrough's name pop up in the Intel at DawgNation.com this week. You know, Georgia does not have a long history of players from the state of Louisiana. I guess Terrell Biera comes to mind. They're not a long list of Louisiana kids, though, that have played at Georgia. How realistic is to think that Georgia could be in the mix here for Kimbrough out of the Sportsman's Paradise?
Yeah, I like that. Sportsman's Paradise. Nice state name drop there, Brandon. But there's kind of a nexus of good things for all schools when they want to raid the Bayou right now. Number one is where's LSU at? Does Orgeron staff have another year of good graces before there's some really Texas Pete, Louisiana hot sauce, or Tony Shafir's hot sauce on that seat. Maybe likely so, but I think where it works there for Chester Kimbrough is I think he's the nation's number 24 corner. Pretty good player, matched up very well. Jaden Hazelwood told me that he performed very well when he had their one-on-one reps, and he really impressed them. But here's how the sliver of the door opens a little bit for all schools, including Georgia. Is the state of Louisiana also has the nation's number 2 cornerback and the nation's number 15 cornerback in the class of 2019. So there's got to be a little bit of, I want to say recruiting gamesmanship, or you got to kind of choose your shot here. If Louisiana, who still has not offered Kimbrough, goes in hard now after Kimbrough, well, that will mean if they accept a commitment from Kimbrough, then that would hurt things for them with perhaps the number 2 guy Stingley and the number 15 guy Bush. So they've got to really kind of measure their shot here of how hard they're going to come after Kimbrough. Meanwhile, it allows other SEC schools like Georgia, other big-time programs that are chasing him as well, the kind of Florida, Auburn of the world, to kind of come in there. And the door to the state of Louisiana is currently a little bit more cracked open than it usually is. And I think that leads to definitely another 2 factors for Georgia recruiting. One, it was always really hard to pull players out of Louisiana. And if they were really, really good, Alabama usually came in and swiped them away. The other factor is Georgia didn't really recruit nationally, and especially regionally in the SEC footprint, like they do under Kirby Smart. But all that stuff has changed considerably now. Instead of just getting a good old boy or a good kid that they like from a part of Georgia that's maybe ranked in the top 30 at their position, Georgia is really going to try and find the very best players out there. And Chester Kimbrough is a name to start thinking about with cornerback. Now, I still think the cornerback, Georgia's already got Jalen Terry. They might take 1 or 2 more when Andrew Booth and DJ Turner maybe close out that list. Likely so. Do they take 2 safeties in 2019 with a guy like Kyle Hamilton fit very well in that regard? I think he would. So not going to get a huge DB class with about 5 or 6 guys, or maybe a 7 cornerback class in 2019. But I think the 4 to 5 that Georgia gets in 2019 are going to be pretty stinking good.
You mentioned Trayvon Walker, the great interview you had with him from the Kroger Before the Hedges show last night on the DawgNation outlets. Of course, you're going to write about that at the Centel Intel coming up this week, I have no doubt. And I think my fascination with that's going to be very much the same way that many Georgia fans' fascination is going to be. The fact that apparently Kirby Smart is influential right now in Walker's decision, reaching out, contacting him a lot. I mean, if you're a Georgia fan, that's going to be music to your ears, right? I mean, I think a lot of people are like me. Defensive tackle, biggest need for this team. Walker, best defensive tackle available. You love the fact that Georgia's putting the full court press the way they are. Apparently, according to Walker's description of Kirby Smart, making some personal contact here. I think that's great news if you're a UGA fan, right?
Yeah, Brandon, this is another chalk up, another example here in following the visits. And it seems very interesting to me that over the past 2 or 3 years, there's a pattern where it seems like when one of those guys is at UGA on a visit, and Trayvon Walker, Owen Popo, Nolan Smith, a lot of those guys all end up kind of traveling together and hanging out together at Georgia. They're very chummy on the sidelines during game weekend, and you see them in camp events, and the one yesterday was a great example. Trayvon was basically at the hip of Nolan the entire time. Those guys were talking. Those guys were laughing. Those guys were putting on dance moves that Brandon Adams would be proud of to stay warm in the midst of those frigid 37-degree temperatures at Beaufort High School.
I'm quite a dancer, Jeff. That is what I'm known for.
I know that's probably why Eddie the Blind Squirrel took his blindfold off.
Right.
You were dancing pre-show before your show began today, just to get the blood flowing, kind of like Ray Lewis style, before another great DawgNation Daily. But for Von Walker, I think the schools there are Alabama, Georgia, Clemson, South Carolina. It seems like he's having a hard time figuring out who the 5th school is, which kind of to me reads like that those 4 are entrenched, and it's going to be one of those 4. Georgia really recruits him heavily, and there's no coach that is talking to him right now as prevalently with the same sort of levels of communication and interest as Kirby Smart. And that's a recipe right now for Georgia to really stay in the thick of things there with Trayvon Walker.
So if you have said before that Trayvon Walker is my biggest need for the 2019 class in terms of uncommitted players especially, The players I'm the most excited about, though, that might be a slightly different answer. I just believe that Jaden Hazelwood and Dominic Blaylock are going to be program changers for UGA. Now, I'm not going to predict individual success because that's a hard thing to predict. But in terms of nation's number 1 and 2 wide receiver, I mean, for me as a fan, I am more excited about them than even, like, say, the pair of James Cook and Zamir White from the class of 2018. I just think that for a Georgia offense that's very close to really breaking through in a big way, adding those sort of game-breaking wide receivers to sort of, stretch defenses vertically, I just think it changes the entire equation for Fromm and for Fields and for Jim Chaney and James Coley and all the decision-makers there on offense. And I love reading about these guys. You reported about the way they showed out this weekend. They both earned their spot at the opening event later on this summer in Frisco, Texas. I just think that the addition of Blaylock and Hazelwood to the 2019 class and the eventually on the Georgia roster, Jeff, I just think the sky's the limit for what the offense is going to be able to do with wide receivers of this caliber eventually working in Athens.
It makes me think of some gift that somebody could put together, or some meme that somebody can put together with Kirby Smart or something on the internet about Michael Douglas. Greed is good. Everybody has that one friend in a social setting that always says something like, I'll have one more, let's do one more. That's the way Georgia recruits now, man. And it's, if you want to sound really informed about Georgia recruiting, here's a quick bullet point to do so. There's going to become a point where me and Brandon in 2020 are going to be talking about, okay, Jeff, Georgia has never nailed a 5-star kicker. They've never landed a 5-star long snapper in the Kirby Smart era. How important is the long snapper going to be? Because the one maybe region of undiscovered country when it comes to Georgia recruiting success, especially under this staff, is the 5-star receiver. Jaden Hazelwood, number 1 in the country. Dominic Blaylock, number 2 in the country. And you got to go all the way back to 2009. A.J. Green was the last 5-star in 2009 to be rated so highly as Hazelwood. And then you had the very next year Marlon Brown out of Tennessee in 2010, who's the lone remaining 5-star that Georgia has signed to a class. Now I'm talking about the pure receiver position, not an athlete position like Barry Godwin was rated at. And Brandon Smith was actually rated as an athlete as well and ended up on the defensive side of the ball. These are players. Georgia's checked off quarterbacks. They've checked off offensive linemen now, offensive guards, offensive tackles, maybe offensive center. They haven't pulled in a 5-star at center because there are very rarely any few 5-stars at center. 5-star defensive tackle's been done. 5-star outside linebacker's been done. Inside linebacker. Cornerback was checked off last year with Tyson Campbell. Safety was checked off the year before with Richard LeCount. Georgia at all these positions. And I want to come back to one little thing. Nolan Smith in that 4.15 short shuttle. That's a great measure of lateral quickness. Dominic Blaylock's short shuttle in basically in a night where it looked like Elsa was going to come by, and when Elsa was going to come by and sing her song in the middle of competition at Buford High School, he runs a 4.0 short shuttle drill. And he's actually gone 3.9 in a camp setting before in the short shuttle. And if 4.2 is elite for an NFL cornerback prospect, 3.9 and 4.0 is scary good. And you got to think about coordinators and which one of those guys are you going to double when Georgia's got a lethal tight end like Luke Ford streaking down the field. They've got a James Cook sneaking out in the flat. They've got a depth quarterback, and you've got Blaylock on one side. On the other side, you've got Jaden Hazelwood maybe. On the other side, you've got Tommy Bush there ready to wreak havoc as well. Pierce Jackson in the slot. There's going to be hard nightmares for defensive coordinators to deal with. And that's why you saw how an ESPN writer recently felt that Georgia would have the top offense in college football for the next 3 years.
So for those of you that are not fathers of daughters, you may not have caught the Frozen reference from Jeff Sintel there and the cold conditions there in Buford on Sunday. That was a reference to the movie Frozen. So I just want to make sure, Jeff, everybody's up to date on everything that you're bringing to the table there. We appreciate your time here as a part of our Marlowe's Tavern Tell-All here on DawgNation Daily. Always a lot of fun, Jeff. Great stuff. Look forward to reading a bunch more from you coming up in the next few days at DawgNation.com, and then we'll catch up with you again soon.
All right, guys. Let us know who you want to read about, and we'll do our best.
Let's take a look around the rest of the league. This is SEC Through.
Always fun with Jeff Sintel, Marlowe's Tavern Tell-All every Tuesday here on DawgNation Daily. We'll transition now to the SEC Through, and of course I will be happy to report that just like we're back up and running at full speed and full power again on DawgNation Daily, SEC Country Live the same way this afternoon, 3 p.m. Eastern Time on the YouTube page, which we were able to be on yesterday, and the Facebook page, which we're looking forward to being back on again today here for SEC Country Live at 3 p.m. Eastern Time this afternoon. One of the things that I think will be interesting to get into today is what the Florida quarterbacks coach Brian Johnson has said about Emory Jones. Really kind of toss some praise his way. This comes off a day yesterday on SEC Country Live. If you watch the show, and I honestly don't remember how much we talked about this on DawgNation Daily yesterday. Maybe we mentioned this a good bit. I don't really remember. But I sort of, raised the question of Emory Jones only working as the number 4 quarterback during Florida practice. There had been some talk that he looked like he wasn't really ready to kind of push Felipe Franks for the starting job. Maybe that changes by the summer. But, in the SEC as of late, we have seen a lot of quarterbacks come in and play well as freshmen. We've seen 2 examples of that at Georgia. They could potentially be set up to do that for a 3rd year in a row if Justin Fields ever got his opportunity, to say nothing of what's happened in Alabama with a couple different freshman quarterbacks. Missouri had Drew Lock a few years ago. Jake Bentley in South Carolina. Kind of on and on you could go with freshman quarterbacks who played pretty well in the SEC. Was Emory Jones going to be the next one? Well, for Florida fans, he was supposed to be, but at practice, he just really hasn't been, kind of getting those kinds of reps yet. According to the reports from SECCountry.com, the only quarterback really pushing Franks at the moment was Kyle Trask, who, as I've said before, is a former walk-on who wasn't even the starting quarterback for his team in high school. That's potentially problematic for the Florida quarterback situation. But Brian Johnson, the Gators quarterback coach, did speak with the media yesterday and really tossed some praise Jones' way, saying that he's shown a lot of what made him such a highly regarded prospect coming out of high school. Is this just sort of puffery from a coach, or is it real? I think we have to wait and see on that. Maybe the spring game, the orange and blue debut, they call it, maybe that'll give us some indication of where things are going with Emory Jones. But this is really the first praise that Jones has even gotten. I think if you're a Florida fan, and if you are, why would you be listening to the show or watching the show right now? But for Florida fans, this is at least a start in terms of getting Emory Jones in the conversation for possible solutions for Florida quarterback, because right now I think they really need one. That was a weakness for the team last year, and they need better play from that position here in 2018. I thought that Mike Griffith from SEC Country, who covers the Tennessee Vols, has been kind of on an interesting story here over the last couple of days, and he made an appearance on the Alabama podcast, also from SEC Country, to kind of talk a little bit more about this. But it's the subject of the Tennessee coaching search, and y'all know that a lot of the emails were made public at the end of last week, sort of dating back to John Curry's firing as Tennessee athletic director. Some of the emails about that coaching search became public because of freedom of information requests and things of that nature. One of the things we find out is apparently an Alabama staffer, like someone in the athletic office, had emailed some data to John Curry, the Tennessee AD, about, hey, maybe this will help you with your coaching search. It was essentially some work that Alabama had done to kind of come up with a ranking for all the coaches. And for the most part, the rankings, I guess, don't really surprise. Saban was tops on the list, Urban Meyer second. The top 5, top 10, for the most part, were the guys you would expect. But the angle that Mike Griffith took on this at SEC Country, and I think this is kind of interesting too, is, third Saturday in October is supposed to be the sacred date on the college football calendar. Tennessee and Alabama are supposed to be, great rivals that are at each other's throat all the time, and yet in the offseason, you've got Alabama attempting to help Tennessee with its coaching search, and we don't really know what the motives were for helping with the search. We don't know that they were truly at face value trying to help Tennessee. Maybe they're trying to steer them away from Jeremy Pruitt. Maybe they were just, I don't even know why. There's really no way to know what the true motives were here. But it certainly does not give the appearance of the Alabama-Tennessee rivalry being red hot at the moment if Alabama's giving any data whatsoever to Tennessee. Now, we also don't know if John Curry used the data, but I don't mind telling you, if you're at Tennessee who's been clobbered by the Crimson Tide for years and years and years, this is not what you want to see. You want to see Alabama viewing you as a rival again, and that's probably one of Jeremy Pruitt's big jobs as he takes over as the Tennessee coach. Speaking of Tennessee, some of the other email stuff that has become public indicated that the overwhelming choice by fans who are emailing John Curry was for Lane Kiffin to return as head coach. Kiffin had some fun with this on Twitter yesterday, essentially responding to this, basically, suggesting he was, it was nice that he was thought of once again. I think if you're Tennessee, it's also demoralizing. The fans have not sort of given up on the idea of Kiffin yet. That's another thing that Jeremy Pruitt's going to have to work through in his early days on the job. And later on today on SEC Country Live, we're also going to talk a little bit more about something that Greg McElroy said about Texas A&M and its new coach, Jimbo Fisher. Apparently not too high on Fisher's ability to kind of turn things around there in a College Station. We'll see how that plays out. We'll talk to you more about it at SEC Country Live this afternoon, 3 p.m. Eastern Time on the Facebook and YouTube pages for SEC Country. And for now, we'll make that your SEC through. And as we get ready to wrap up our program today, speaking of the Florida quarterback situation, however that plays out, of course, in Jacksonville in October, these two teams will get back together and play each other once again, and we believe it's going to be another win for the Georgia Bulldogs. We do the Gator Hater Countdown every single day here on DawgNation Daily. In 214 days from right now, Georgia travels back to Jacksonville, gets another win over Florida, and we now have Eddie back on the set the way that he's supposed to be. Jeff Sintel mentioned to us before that somehow Eddie had lost his blindfold. One of our producers, Michael, was good enough to go find that for me. So now Eddie here on our set for the video audience, back in character the way that he is supposed to be. We love doing the Gator Hater Countdown. We love Dan Mullen's comments about George and the blind squirrel. We're going to have some fun with that between now and the time these two teams get ready to play. Speaking of fun, we'll also have some fun on the DawgNation Daily Double. That's bonus content from DawgNation Daily. We'll have that up for you at the forum at forum.dawgnation.com. Make sure you check that out, and we'll see you tomorrow right here on DawgNation Daily. And for those of you on video, good to be with you. We'll knock out some comments here. Miriam Martin Corbin says, can't wait to smack down those stinking slimy reptiles. Miriam, I love that thought, love that idea, and appreciate you checking in on Facebook today. Joy Stripling says, here we go, talking about the dumpster fire that is the ugly orange of Tennessee. That is probably my least favorite of all the oranges. Joy, you may be right about that. Chad Clark says, now that Eddie's seen the light, we're going to be eating fat at UGA. Yeah, maybe so. I mean, maybe it was just like an Easter miracle. I mean, maybe the blindfold came off because all of a sudden even the blind are starting to see around here now. Eric Moody checks in with his Gator Hater reference on Facebook. Eric, I appreciate that. Alan Verbanchik says Georgia's going to shut out Florida this season. And, boy, they were close to it a year ago, and I love watching those starters who were out of the game, intense about seeing Georgia keep that 0 next to Florida's name in that game. Of course, it didn't work out. And, listen, you've got to play your backup players. You're going to need them later on in a season, but when that late touchdown was scored, I love the intensity the Georgia starters were still showing on the bench, on the sideline. They were voicing their displeasure, which is sort of the great competitive fire that you want football teams to have. Let me go over to YouTube here for a moment, say hello to that audience. Willie McGuire says, I think Nolan's going to transition to outside linebacker. I guess I would probably think that's probably likely to be true as well, that he's probably a pass rusher guy. He's probably one of those outside linebacker guys. Not a Jonathan Ledbetter-style defensive end, not a Bill Norton-style defensive end. Probably more of a pass rushing outside linebacker. I'd probably guess that. Let me hear a few more of these comments on YouTube here for a moment. Some of y'all are reporting an audio issue on YouTube today. I'm not quite sure what that would be. We'll look into that, see if we can get that figured out. But some folks were saying they're having are y'all still having the issue on YouTube? If you are, pop that in the comment section. Let me know. We'll try to get that taken care of for you. Nathan James says, is the recent picture of Elijah Holyfield that's been circulating legit? So here's the story of that picture. Logan Booker is the guy, I guess, who took the picture, who works for our sister station, Athens Sports Radio 960 The Ref. And for those of you who haven't seen it, it's a drill that Elijah Holyfield's doing. And the way that he's holding the football, I wish I had the picture. I'd show it to you. The way that he's holding the football is amazing. Like, his biceps are just, like, popping out of his jersey. I mean, this is one of the most impressive, muscle photos you're ever going to see. But strangely enough, what happened is the SEC network then took the photo from the original photographer and put it out on social media, but the report was they used Photoshop to enhance the biceps to make them look even bigger, and really no one really knows why. The original photo looked great. I mean, Elijah Holyfield looked like the Incredible Hulk as it was, but then they kind of photoshopped the biceps to make them even sort of more cartoonishly big, and then somebody else wanted to, put the picture out there on social media saying, who wants to take this guy on in one-on-one drills? Lindell Mack Wilson from Alabama raised his hand. Lane Kiffin's actually responded to that tweet on social media. So this one photo of Elijah Holyfield that I will tell you was a great picture and a really cool image. This one photo has had like 3 different lives on social media in terms of the SEC network with Photoshop, the other account that tweeted it out that sort of turned into a little bit of a a trash talk between Alabama and Georgia. It's pretty funny to watch how that thing has traveled here as of late. Lloyd Dixon says that Logan put both photos on Twitter. You can see the difference. Yeah, Logan is a pretty good follow on Twitter. He is always tweeting about a bunch of Georgia stuff. But he put the two photos side by side. The first photo stands on its own as incredibly impressive. I mean, Elijah Holyfield looks like he's about to run through a brick wall. He's just, he is ripped to shreds. And then the other photo is like sort of unnecessarily enhanced. I kind of want this to turn into like a thing where like the photo keeps getting bigger and bigger and bigger. Eventually I want him to look like Popeye. Like I want his arms to be all the way out to here. Some of y'all are great on Photoshop. I'm sure that'll probably happen at a certain point in time. But yeah, so it's kind of funny how like there's no need to enhance the arms. But now that it's been done once, I want to kind of see it keep getting bigger and bigger and bigger to the point where he looks like, a action figure out there on the practice field. Nate Thomas says Holyfield's not going to be third string, not until White's 100%. Yeah, listen, I think, in Holyfield's case here, I think he's got a real chance to earn himself some true legit playing time in the early going of the season. Especially if you think about that Austin Peay game where my guess is that he and Harrion are both going to get a lot of carries and they're both going to get a chance to audition. Some of this will happen in G-Day, but the truth is, I don't know. A lot of those G-Day things either end up being false positives or you don't really prove what you want to prove. I think it's that Austin Peay game that's going to give an indication of, is it Harrion or is it Holyfield that sort of emerges as the partner with DeAndre Swift, and then one of the freshmen, either a healthy emerging Zamir White or a speedy change of pace like James Cook, becomes that sort of third option who'll be kind of in the DeAndre Swift role from last year. I mean, that to me is what the pecking order for running back ends up being. Georgia's going to find a way to get 3 guys a lot of carries, 4 guys some carries. There will be an odd man out. That just, numerically almost has to be. I think it's still too early to know who that guy's going to be, though. Chad Clark says if he can hang on to the ball, he's going to be a star this year. I think there's still a very good chance that Elijah Holyfield does emerge as a big-time star. James Fulgham says, who's our punter going to be this year? If I had to bet, I'm betting Jake Camarda. I think that Georgia gave him a scholarship for a reason. I think that punting probably translates from one level to the next better than place kicking does. I think place kicking is incredibly erratic. I think that, kickers can have good moments and bad moments within the same game, and good kickers can have bad games, bad kickers can have good games. Place kicking is a pretty difficult thing to predict. Punting skills, though, that's usually pretty rock solid. And I think that Camarda is going to be a booming punter. My guess is, as he earns that job as a freshman and never looks back, if I had to predict, that's what I'm saying. All right, going back to YouTube for a second, Jungle Cat Jason says he's had no sound issue. Hard Times 57 says everything's good there also. I'm glad to hear that. Appreciate that. Andy Sloan says on YouTube, what's the name of the guy that has the 2 pictures side by side on Twitter? It's Logan. Yeah, Logan Booker is the name of the photographer. And it's a great picture. The Photoshop to me is hilarious. Probably not the most ethical thing in the world. They just sort of ripped it from him. But nonetheless, sort of, I do admit that the cartoonish way that the picture has been blown up is pretty funny. But Logan Booker, the guy who took the original photograph, and Logan's pretty easy to find if you search him there on Twitter. He's pretty active on Twitter in general. And as I said, he works for our sister site, our sister station, 960 The Ref. Jesse Turman says DeAndre Swift and Holyfield will be a great running back tandem. And I think you also have to make room, Jesse, for the thought of that being a trio. I mean, I can tell you there are plenty of people who think Zamir White's going to be healthy. And when he's healthy, batten down the hatches. I mean, I hear from time to time what sort of people say, and sometimes behind the scenes there's a statement made occasionally by a recruit of, well, I saw so and so at blah 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 and he wasn't that good, or I saw so and so at blah 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 and I didn't have that good of a game. Every sort of whisper I've ever heard about Zamir White was he has lived up to the billing for everybody that's ever seen him. That when he's healthy, he's going to be a big-time star, and it's just a matter of when does he get healthy. There's plenty of people who think that he's on his way to being back, and if he is, once again, buckle up your chin strap if you're trying to tackle him. Junior Baker, by the way, linked the picture of Elijah Holyfield in the Facebook comment section. It's a great picture. Really, really an impressive young man. Matthew McGahee takes a different tact on the question of who's going to be the punter. He says, with this offense, they may not need a punter, not likely to need one. Matthew, I like that line. That's pretty good. Alan Verbanchik checking back in with us on Facebook again. Appreciate that. Jason Phillips doesn't want Jim Chaney to go conservative. He says they'll be fine. I think the Georgia offense probably will be fine. I think that's probably true. Randy Hall says Jamari Salyer, the next Larry Allen. That's a pretty interesting comparison for Salyer, and he's also drawn a bunch of rave reviews. Let me go back on YouTube before we get ready to go here. Jerome says, BA, where can I get that sweater you wore yesterday, the gray with the red G? So I will tell you, that is pretty consistently remarked upon as a sweater that people seem to like. That's a fleece cardigan from our friends at Tailgate Apparel. Sometimes when David Green's here on DawgNation Daily, we talk about Tailgate Apparel. Downtown Athens is the place to go. It's in the old Harry Biscuits building in downtown Athens. But if you search Tailgate Apparel Athens online, they have a YouTube page, not a YouTube page, a Facebook page that you can go there and you can get apparel from them, basically order it online. So, yeah, Tailgate Apparel is the name of the company. They are great stuff. Jacob Mahaffey says, saw some video yesterday of Trey Blunt getting some passes from Fromm yesterday. What are the chances he takes the third spot over Ridley? I saw some of that video, too. I was watching it, and then my kids started doing something. I didn't get a chance to finish it. But I saw Blunt in that video as well. And I think that Trey Blunt's got a chance because he's physical. And Kirby likes these physical receivers. And I know that some of the beat writers have kind of given Georgia a hard time because, when they've had the physical receivers in the game over the last 2 years, that normally meant they weren't going to pass the ball. In Blunt's case, as he emerges as a better pass-catching threat, maybe he's a guy that doesn't tip Georgia's hand quite as much. So because of the physicality of Trey Blunt, I think that he does have a chance to be on the field. And I think that that he's going to be a tough guy to beat out. There are some talented receivers at Georgia, but I think you have to include Blunt in that conversation for sure. All right, wish we had time for more comments. We got to run. We'll have a daily double up for you later on at the forum at forum.dawgnation.com. We will have SEC Country Live this afternoon. All the technical hiccups are behind us. Really big thanks to everybody who kind of helps us get through all of that. Hannah, who you see, Michael, who you hear me talk about. Of course, Mark and Patrick on the other side over here in our work area. They've always helped us kind of get through all this technical stuff. And y'all don't notice the upgrades probably as much, but they are a great way to distribute our content in a much more effective fashion. So I'm really excited about the future of DawgNation Daily and SEC Country Live. I love the way that our company has invested in some big-time technology to make these shows even better. You're going to notice that hopefully in the months to come. We appreciate you being a part of DawgNation Daily today, and we will look forward to seeing you tomorrow.